Now it's time for prescription benefits dollars and cents, marketplace trends. Over to you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Heather. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for attending our webinar today. We're going to be visiting about pharmacy benefit dollars and cents, and we look forward to answering any questions at the end of the presentation. So we can go to the next slide and talk about who we'll be presenting today, along with just a quick overview of our learning objectives today. So Wendy Ward is our Senior VP of Strategy and Development, and she will be doing the monitoring and the moderating today, along with the questions and answers at the end. Dr. Callie Panagos will be our main presenter today, with an impressive career as a PharmD, which is a doctor of pharmacy, and dedicating her entire career to looking at the marketplace with pharmacy benefit management and managed care. She also contributes to, as a mentor to the St. John's University, helping students. And I am Jennifer Wilson, and I am the CEO of ARMSRx. We are solely a pharmacy benefit consulting firm. Everyone on our team has dedicated their time and has made an entire career of doing nothing but pharmacy benefit management consulting. So today's learning objectives, we're going to look at the market trends, and we're going to understand the costs associated with and the evaluation of copay assistance programs and alternative funding arrangements. We're going to look at the impact of these financial programs and the differences, because there are many differences with them. We're also going to talk about and weigh the disruption that are associated with these programs, but not to fear the disruption, because they can be very impactful. We're going to look at some additional solutions and strategies in addition to these programs, along with other strategies if for some reason a plan wouldn't qualify to be eligible for these programs. There's other things that you can do to manage the pharmacy benefit and the specialty. And then we're going to look at, we're going to talk some Q&A at the end, so hopefully we can get to everybody's questions. So now I'm going to turn the floor over to Dr. Callie Panagos. Callie?
All right, good afternoon, everyone. And we'll get started. We'll jump right in with understanding what the market trends for managing pharmacy costs including the evaluation of the copay assistance programs and alternative funding programs. So let's jump right in with the market trends. And we'll start with a definition of specialty drug. And we often get asked, what the definition of a specialty drug is. And there is no universally accepted definition for specialty drugs. Each PBM can tweak that definition to suit what they're doing and how they're constructing their formulary. But in general, a specialty medication is a self-administered, not a diabetic medication, self-administered. It could be injectable. It could be an oral medication. It typically requires some type of a special handling or special packaging, although it doesn't have to be. It could be special administration or instructions required, monitoring, some special directions for the patients. And it's typically a higher cost medication overall. And so, like I said, all PBMs have a little bit of a tweaked version, but this by and large is what a specialty definition for a specialty drug is. So specialty spend is always top of mind when we speak with our clients and when they're coming to us for guidance, and we're having the discussion around what's happening in the specialty drug market. And make no mistake about it, it is growing, and it's going to be growing by 8% annually through 2025. There is a lot of development in the specialty drug pipeline. There have been at least 37 new specialty drugs approved in 2021, and the specialty drug class makes up 74% of these drug approvals. There is a lot of development in oncology and infectious disease, and so we'll continue to see growth there, phenomenal growth to help conditions that need to be tended after, but that growth also comes with some pretty high price tags, as we'll be taking a look at. Specialty medications will continue to drive about 53% of the spend And again, autoimmune and oncology are typically the highest drivers within any particular data set that we've looked at. It's autoimmune conditions consist of rheumatoid arthritis, psoriatic arthritis, IBS, Crohn's, to name a few. And so you could be sure that the specialty drug market and the specialty drug pipeline is going to continue to evolve, and the spend will be increasing in that category. So how much does that spend impact what it costs to cover a patient over the course of a year? You could think of it as 75 times what it would cost the traditional drug class. So that's pretty significant. With an average annual cost of $38,000 to cover a specialty patient's drug compared to under $500 for a non-specialty drug. And so it's no wonder that brokers and clients and employer groups are very, very focused on strategies and solutions to mitigate these costs. COVID has had an impact on every single American, for sure, in some way or another. And it's definitely affected our industry and where we see growth in the specialty drug class. What has happened over the COVID pandemic is that many people delayed their treatment, delayed going to the physicians, did not receive the treatment that they needed, or the diagnosis that they needed to get evaluated. It just wasn't possible. Oncology patient doctor visits declined 20% in 2021, just to give you a perspective of how, in fact, the medical or the healthcare industry was impacted and how individuals offset their care. And then during that time, the potential or possibility for developing additional conditions, which is very real, and many studies have already emerged showing how individuals over the pandemic have developed additional conditions, including diabetes and heart disease. But that cancer screenings also declined significantly. Things like mammograms, colonoscopies, and pap smears all were not really tended over. So self-care was not happening over the pandemic. And so what does that mean in terms of specialty drug markets? It means that as people begin to come forward and go to their physicians and seek their care, we can expect that these specialty drug costs will increase. As biosimilars continue to make a strong presence in the market, and with the anticipation of the Humira biosimilar in 2023, we're going to see these impact the specialty growth or specialty costs, and we're really excited about that because biosimilars are not new to the market. They emerged somewhere around 2015, but they didn't charge out of the gate like many expected them to. They were a little bit slow in their uptick, making only an impact in some oncology palliative care. But now with the emergence of an autoimmune biosimilar that is really almost top 3 in most employers' spend, we can expect to see that impact of biosimilars significantly impact pharmacy spend. And it will straddle both medical spend as well as the pharmacy spend. There are 7 FDA-approved Humira biosimilars with their anticipated launch dates through January and November of next year. I think the first one will be in January. That's really exciting news, and a couple of those biosimilars will be interchangeable, which means from a patient perspective and a prescriber perspective, it'll be easy to move a patient over from their existing therapy to the biosimilar. These biosimilars could save upwards of $54 billion over the next 10 years. So let's not lose sight of that. Those will be important strategies. And you could think of a biosimilars as you would a generic in some ways. It is comparable to the brand. It is a large molecule, but their mechanism of action or how they treat that condition is very similar to the brand drug. So from a clinical perspective, it is truly something to consider. But some of the barriers that have been around adoption included some of these clinical pauses, if you will. How will you implement these? Where will they fall on the formulary? And what financial and policy issues would surround these biosimilars were some of the points of consideration. But these are really moving forward fast now. Among biosimilar development and new therapy development, you can look at gene and cell therapies for blood cancers, and those are really developing nicely. As you'll see to the right, the chart in terms of estimated growth over the next few years is quite astonishing. This is really wonderful for those individuals who are plagued by these rare conditions and now have some hope in therapies to help them live a better, longer quality of life. And so by 2030, we're going to see about 54 to 74 gene and cell therapies to be approved in the US market during that time period. So some of the emerging market trends to help offset specialty drug costs and how do we help mitigate some of these include strategies such as copay assistance and alternative funding programs. They have definitely grown in presence in the pharmacy market over the last few years, and they do leverage the availability of funds through the drug manufacturer to help offset plan costs as well as member costs, and so make these drugs more affordable from every angle for utilization. Many PBMs are offering copay card solutions and have good structure in place, and we'll be talking more about those. And then there are several third-party organizations that promise significant savings from the manufacturer assistance and alternative funding, and we'll be talking about those as we move on. These are good solutions overall, and we'll be kind of delving into each one as we move on here. Specialty assistance programs focus on dollars available through the PBM. Now, over the last 4 or 5 years, formulary development has made exclusion of drugs. There are more exclusions than ever before. So, and that will continue to grow. So as formularies are continuing to develop year over year through the PBMs, you can expect that exclusions will become much more of a part of that development. And with that, when drugs are excluded from a formulary, the opportunity for specialty patient assistance can be one of the solutions that can be looked at. These savings are opportunities for members and plans to save and allow members to get the therapies that they need. Now, there are various plan design changes that have to be considered, the member experience, impact to rebate, and they'll vary between among program to program. So it's important as you look at a specialty patient assistance program for a drug that is excluded, that you work very closely with your broker and consultant to evaluate all the nuances, what your patient or group demographics include, what the utilization is, what it's been over the last few years, what the projection is going forward, so that you can make the most informed decision for optimal savings to your plan. Copay maximization drug cards or optimization drug cards really leverage the availability of copay cards available through the manufacturer to offset the plan costs as well as the member costs. Now, the drugs remain on the formulary in these type of scenarios. They're not carved away. They're still part of the pharmacy benefit, but they're managed through a copay card. Typically, we see that these programs are about 30% co-insurance. So the members' portion of the spend will be of 30%, but of course that is offset through the copay card. The plan cost is about 25% shared savings. We've seen upwards of 30% shared savings there, but the rebates remain intact. So as you evaluate a program and you may want to look at copay maximization, some of the points to consider is the structure of the plan. Now, most of the plans that offer, or PBMs that offer copay maximizer programs are really applicable to PPO plans and not high deductible plans. So that's an important distinction to have. A variable copay program are, again, the specialty drugs are not carved away from the pharmacy benefit, but managed through the copay card. It's similar to copay optimization. Works really on the back end. And from a member experience point of view, both of these programs really do not require much, if anything, from the member. In fact, members are quite happy because they go from wherever their traditional copay was to a zero out-of-pocket cost. And so they're very delighted to have that advantage given to them. It does not require anything further from the member in terms of financial disclosures or any family information. The shared savings, again, is about 25%, and those copays, the rebates remain intact. Now, alternative funding solutions there are several solutions out there on the marketplace, and they will typically remove the specialty drugs from the plan, but they manage them, through their own platform, if you will, and there are several vendors out there that do this very, very nicely. Typically the rebates will go away in these type of scenarios, but the savings greatly offsets any loss in rebates, and that is part of the analysis. There is a financial component or an income eligibility that is required, not just of the patient who will be receiving therapy, but very often it's the family as well. So it has to be looked at through that aspect. The specialty management, the utilization, and the visibility has to be thought of there. So you have to work very closely with that vendor through your consultant or your broker to ensure that there is access to the data and there is ability to view visibility. And that very, very closely what the member experience and the service model is. Many of these alternative funding solutions do offer very comprehensive service models from the member experience. In terms of specialty carve-out, there is more of a desire to go this route with contracting with a specialty pharmacy that's not exclusive to the PBM. There's pros and cons to doing an arrangement like this, and very often you have to consider any fees that are applicable and ongoing management of that specialty formulary to kind of determine whether this is an advantage for your group or not. As a consultant and being in the industry for very many years, I always guide our clients with kind of understanding their demographics, what their industry is, what their utilization is, and are they truly maximizing all of the components available in their benefit to ensure they at a foundational level, you start out strong. And you really want to look at that as any approach to specialty management is understanding that your foundation is set up initially very, very comprehensively. So let's look at learning objective number 2, which is impact, and how to effectively evaluate the financial impact of these programs, because at the end of the day, it comes down to what savings are projected and what savings are actually realized. So when you're looking at impact and you're asking yourself, is this a program I should be putting in for our client? Is this something that's going to really be a meaningful program for them? It's best to work with a team that allows really utilization of the data and analysis as a side-by-side comparison to fully evaluate the pros and cons of each of these strategies as they pertain to your particular client. And it'll vary by client. There's no one size fits all. What might be good for one smaller client or in a particular region or state may not be the same for another client located someplace else in a different industry with different utilization. But you should always factor in the rebate component and do that appropriately. So make sure that if the vendor is looking at doing a savings analysis, that they're pulling in the right rebate and not an industry rebate number that's not really what your group is performing at. You want to be sure to factor in any program costs or fees, and that includes any particular penalties or any other fees that would be impacted, and you want to wrap those right in. You also want to be very careful not to assume that 100% a shift of specialty medications to assistance programs is going to happen. So it's important for your vendor to have flexibility. What other solutions are there when members may not qualify, outside of the fact that there might be some clinical barriers as well. You also want to have a good discussion around member experience, qualifications, and how that implementation process takes place. Earlier, we talked about the variable copay program, and this slide illustrates just how the savings can be extracted from a particular drug there. So if you start out with a drug that's $3,000 in cost, and a member copay would be $100 if you look at the right side, and then they have a copay card or an offset coupon, if you will, that's going to add a value of $1,000. Well, that copay card is going to be maximized, leaving the member at a zero. But it's also taken off that drug cost of $3,000 and leaving a $2,000 impact or cost to the plan, whereby if that maximization or copay program was not in place, the plan would be paying $900 more for that same drug. So while those availability of drug cards are on the market and are available, it is wise to take advantage of those to offset your plan spend. Here's another example of just how phenomenal alternative funding savings can be. And here are a few drugs that, from an example of impact analysis in various drug classes, including HIV, including MS, severe asthma, autoimmune drugs. And so here you'll see the total amount of claims, the total drug cost, and then just how the savings, it's about half or a little bit more actually in savings from the alternate funding program. That's pretty significant. And so when you partner with that right vendor and they're able to give you an analysis, the savings that come as a result of implementing a program like this are significant. And as we've talked about the increase and projected increase in specialty drug costs, it is a solution that should be evaluated for your groups. Here's another example of what a funding analysis would look like. And we talked about implementing or make sure you pull in the appropriate program fees. So in this scenario, it's $390,000, this line here, in program fees. You also want to make sure that they're pulling in the rebate impact appropriately. So this is what an example of an analysis could look like. So with the gross drug spend, what the savings would be with the alternate funding. So pull that in, and then you get your net, you pull in your fees, you pull in your rebate, and then you get your actual estimated savings there. Learning objective number 3 has to do with how to weigh the member disruption created by these programs and how to mitigate that disruption. So what would the member experience look like? And from a clinical standpoint, as a clinician, I'm always focused on member experience and making sure that members are receiving the therapy they need and are able to care for themselves. A healthy member is a healthy employee, is a more productive employee. And so we always keep that front and center as we guide our clients through any programs and evaluate any strategies for implementation. So over to the left here, let's just look at it side by side. From a member cost perspective, there is no cost for a copay program or copay card program. It's just a shared savings scenario. In terms of member costs on alternate funding, It could be fully funded, partially funded, or ineligible based on income. So because there is that aspect in evaluating a member's income level, the vendor you partner with should have flexibility and should be able to have alternate funding strategies. What other programs do they have in place for members who may not be eligible based on income? In terms of plan costs, it's a 25 to 30% shared savings, but again, the plan is still going to receive a good chunk of the savings. Same thing on the alternate funding. In terms of specialty carved in or carved out, the specialty drugs on the copay programs will stay part of the formulary and part of the pharmacy benefit plan design. So all programs and prior authorizations and so forth would still apply. In an alternate funding solution, those specialty drugs are typically carved away from the pharmacy benefit plan, and so the PBM programs would not apply. However, the vendor may have their own prior authorization and their own strategies for managing the specialty drugs, and many of them do. So it's important to evaluate that as you look through your solutions. And in terms of rebates, the rebates are maintained under the copay programs, however, not in the alternate funding solution program. In terms of specialty claims utilization, there is visibility through the copay card because, again, it's not carved away. But in an alternate funding solution, while those drugs are carved away, there is availability of the data is there, right? So you can get it, but you need to work very, very closely and thoroughly with the vendor through your consultant or broker, and again, who would advocate on your behalf to ensure that you're receiving the data, you're able to view, you're getting reports on performance, what drugs are being mitigated, what the savings are. You really want to take a look at that and have that available to you. In terms of plan design, again, copay card solutions are not a good fit for high deductible plans, okay? Only PPO plans. So when you're evaluating your groups, make sure to ask what portion of the membership is high deductible, which portion is not. And in terms of specialty as well, you want to look at that component. In alternative funding, plan design does not have an impact. So there isn't really kind of a difference between high deductible and PPO. It's just really how specialty drugs will be treated. So that will be the update in your plan design documents. Specialty drugs will be routed through, this process, and that'll be outlined. In a copay card, there is no income level requirements. Nothing will be asked of the patient or their family members. But in an alternative funding solution, there will be questions around financial eligibility. For drug utilization review, that will continue through the PBM under the copay maximization program. So that's a consideration there. And in alternate funding, that will not take place on the PBM side. But again, the vendor will be having the data, and there is an opportunity to continue that process through the vendor or consultant you're working with who can keep an eye on drug utilization. So as a recap on alternate funding solutions, you want to engage with the vendor that has flexibility in the programs. They want to have other solutions in place to be able to mitigate or spend and help members who do not have income qualifications. You also want to make sure there are no fees, upfront fees for implementation or onboarding. Anything that you have to pay upfront, we advise that that is not a good fit. You want to have the fees applicable once those program savings are achieved. You want to make sure the vendor has a prior authorization in place for appropriate care. So in the midst of trying to control our specialty spend, we don't want to inadvertently have a member on therapy that's either experimental, does not have the right diagnosis, or is not quite a candidate for that type of therapy. You want to make sure that your alternate funding vendor has a very broad medication list, typically, upwards of 300 drugs or more, and upwards of 1,500 NDCs or more is a good start. The broader the list, the more opportunity for funding. You want to evaluate the member service component. What is the process for transition? How the communication strategies work? What outreach is done through either written or telephone, or is there an app or portal or some other avenue through which a member can find transition easy to go through? The last thing you want is a member to fall off of the therapy and any noise to be created. You want a vendor who is able to work with your partners, your TPA partners, your PBM, your health plan. This includes your stop-loss vendors. You certainly want to have all those parties communicating in an alternate funding strategy. You want to have that access to the data and the reporting as you need. So that is a component that you would talk about right at the onset before any agreements are made. And you want to be able to audit the program. Any good program anywhere across the board in PBM should have the ability and flexibility to be audited. That's how you know it's feasible, it has integrity, and you want to have that access to audit the program. Now, there have been some legislative considerations over the last year or so, and we monitor this and take a look at what the impact is state by state and how this can ultimately affect the availability of these programs. Now, at this time, we do not feel there are any real concerns in terms of availability of these programs for PBMs or employers or the marketplace, but we monitor progress here continually and ongoing and advise our clients appropriately. There has been some noise with J&J and ESI Save-Ons program and how they leverage the funds there and the impact on J&J. But again, we'll keep an eye and advise appropriately state by state what programs would be applicable. And again, that goes back to evaluating your group. What is your group demographics? Where are they located? How many people are using specialty drugs? What kind of specialty drugs are being utilized? It's part of the evaluation process. All right, learning objective number 4, solutions and strategies. What are the solutions available in addition to or in place of the copay assistance alternate funding as the potential regulations may affect how they are used in the future? Now, in general, the programs we discuss should not be your main go-to programs in terms of specialty management strategies. When you embark on putting a plan onto any platform or PBM platform, you want to evaluate what programs are available through the clinical management solutions, what utilization programs are there, what prior auths, step therapies, and other clinical tools to manage your particular population. You'll want to understand which of these programs have fees associated with them and which do not, and only turn on the ones that are meaningful for your population. You don't want to turn on too many programs that cause disruption or noise, or ones that aren't clinically savvy. So you want to be able to hone in on, here are the ones that make the most sense for my group from a clinical perspective, and your broker or consultant will work closely with you on that. You want to take a look at your formulary and plan design strategies, including tiered specialties. So we're doing a lot of advising on plan design strategies and doing a lot of copay modeling in terms of changing the specialty tier. Do we do a co-insurance? How do we kind of structure that? So it's a broader benefit, maybe a little bit more on the member side, maybe less. So we will model all of those plan design strategies out with you. Utilization management programs, again, are they needed across every therapeutic category? No. Which ones are important to have them in? That depends on what your population, what the utilization is, what your claims data shows, and which ones really should be implemented or not. Another strategy that is very, very successful for our clients is implementing dollar thresholds for prior authorizations. And this allows a conversation to be had with the broker or the client, and ideally both, around a particular case study or condition that's come in. And we're able to get ahead of that and have a discussion. So at least there is information exchange. It's my belief as a clinician and been in this industry for a very long time, knowledge is power. The more we can empower our clients to understand their benefit and be part of the conversation, the more confident they feel in the solutions that they have in place. And that's very, very important. And again, as we talked earlier in the presentation, biosimilar and gene therapy, we want to talk about how do you put strategies in place within your formulary, and that includes new drugs to market strategies and other strategies around how those drugs will go on to your either pharmacy benefit, perhaps it's your medical benefit, and we will evaluate those strategies with you. Now, there's been a lot of discussion over the last years around pharmacogenomic testing. This is applicable mostly in the mental health space. And where is it right to use? We'll evaluate where pharmacogenomic testing can be impactful in a particular utilization or population. Channel management, again, pharmacy or benefit. Very often there are drugs running on the medical side that really should be on the pharmacy side. And sometimes there's a drug or two that's on the pharmacy side that would be better suited through the medical side. And we'll conduct that evaluation for you. We can expect that as in the years going forward, as new drugs come to market, there's going to be significant growth in areas like cancer, hemophilia, Alzheimer's, to just name a few. So channel management will become a key area of scrutiny to determine whether drugs are being bucketed appropriately. How are drugs managed under the medical benefit? Are there access to medical rebates? You'll want to look at those strategies and ask those questions as you lay the foundation for your RX benefit, which is the most utilized benefit. Are there consistent policies across both benefits? So are your medical drugs receiving a prior authorization, same as they would in the pharmacy spend? So one of the things we look at is that availability to adhere to clinical criteria on where the drug sits. So that's important. And then what opportunities are there for clinical interventions and physician outreach? And I'll tell you, this is not to be overlooked. This is imperative that there is a discussion around clinical interventions and if, opportunity for alternative drug or lower cost drug that is clinically warranted based on evidence-based medicine, and having that thoughtful discussion with the physician around using a different drug, and that's very patient-specific. That takes evaluating the patient history to determine what drug would be suggested and having that conversation with the physician as to why, from a clinical perspective, the drug is being offered. Physicians are very open to those conversations. I know because I've done them for many, many years, and they are very receptive to the change. As long as it's approached from a clinical perspective. They care what their members pay. So if you wrap that in as well and say your member will save X by using this alternative drug, they're very willing to do that and help their patients out. And here are some examples of clinical interventions, just a couple to illustrate to you, give you an idea of where they can be honed in on. The first one, Korlym, which is for Cushing's syndrome. This particular drug was the right drug. It was FDA dosing appropriate, but in the case of this particular patient and their underlying conditions and some comorbidities, it was optimal to start them on a different dose, a slightly lower dose, just to make sure they have success with therapy. And having that conversation with the physician, they said, oh my goodness, yes, you're absolutely right. and we're able to achieve significant savings for the plan in the course of doing this intervention. So win for the patient, win for the plan. In terms of hepatitis C, there are many therapies now on the market, some generic, first-line therapies that can be used for treatment. You'll want to evaluate first-line treatment options, brands and generics, cost of the drug, as well as wrapping in any rebate impact, and that's done across every intervention to get to savings. Now, there's been so many hepatitis C interventions. 18,000 is a little on the low side. Quite honestly, there are upwards of 50,000 now that there are some generics, dropping in cost. In terms of our ability to think about it out of the box strategies and look for solutions where they are, in terms of cystic fibrosis, we had a case come in where there was a clinical government trial, and so we look for solutions where there are available and all the stars aligned. We're able to get the patient into the clinical government trial. And so this took the entire spend off of the plan, and the patient was being monitored appropriately through a very, very good program within their establishment. So no disruption for the patient. And then in terms of clinical low value drugs, and I know Duexis is generic now, but there are other drugs like it in the traditional drug side, and $30,000 is $30,000, and where that can be offset, it's impactful to the plan when you have 2, 3, 4 members on a low value drug. So what are the key takeaway for all of you here today is specialty assistance programs have lots of opportunities associated with them, but you really should evaluate them for your particular population very closely with your consultant and or broker. It's important to monitor these programs and keep an eye on any type of legislative changes that may be coming downstream. And again, work closely with your consultant and broker on that. Specialty management programs are different among the vendors, so you want to look at and compare what options are there through your PBM vendor, and really kind of make sure you're getting the full picture there so that you can implement what's right for your group. Always ask for data. The truth is in the data, and you're going to be able to evaluate performance of a program based on the data that's provided. And so having that access and analyze, so having access to the data is one thing, but make it actionable through proper analysis is how you make an informed decision. And so it's important to have the access, but also to have the proper analysis done. In terms of emerging trends and specialty, there are other considerations for having a comprehensive management strategy, and all of those we talked about in terms of laying the proper foundation and then going from there, determining if copay programs are the right fit, alternate funding is the right fit, and how do you evaluate those programs at the onset and going forward. Learning objective number 5 is our question and answer period. So I'd like to turn the floor over to our audience and thank you for your attention to this topic today and ask for any questions.
Callie, at this time, we don't have any questions.
All right.
Okay.
Well, if our audience does have questions, you can drop them in the chat or send them over, and we'll be happy to address specific questions, at another time.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. That concludes our prescription benefits, dollars and cents, marketplace trends presentation today. Thank you.